to talk about your book. So you wrote a book titled Wrestling Through Adversity, empowering children, teens, and young adults to win in life. What was the main purpose of writing your book?
Well, the main purpose was to show people there's something that they can do to help them, their children, to help themselves, as we talked about, as
Yeah.
independent practitioners. And the reason, there were many reasons why I wrote it. I was inspired by people who, one particular wrestler, I read his book, Wrestling with Life, and he was at the World Trade Center when it was during the terrorist attack. And he had been a wrestler in his previous life, and he was also working in finance, Merrill Lynch, and he didn't have the same build as the other people who went to Harvard. He didn't go to the same schools, the elite schools, and um, he had like a wrestler's body, like no chin, big muscles.
Yes.
And so, but the thing that Phil had was he said the truth. He had a very good analytical mind. So he was there at the morning when the attack started. He had just come out of the gym that was in the building in the World Trade Center. And he was just sitting down for a moment and doing a little meditation when
Yeah.
the first attack occurred. And he tells his story in his book of how he ran out of the building and he had to run so fast, but fortunately he had his sneakers on because he had just come out of the gym, and he felt sorry for the people who had their dress shoes and high heels on,
Mm.
and they weren't conditioned like he was. So he could run fast, but still he got all the black smoke, and it felt like shards of glass in his lungs as he breathed in. And he did live
Wow.
through that experience, but died subsequently from cancer that riddled his body. But he wrote this wonderful book talking about his life and his goal of becoming a coach. And he inspired me. When I read that, I saw wrestling, of course, as a metaphor for how to live your life, how to wrestle through adversity, in other words,
Mm.
and to win. And so
Yeah.
that was one thing. And then also I began to see all the news on the TV about the shootings in schools, about this little girl in Uvalde who was shot so badly, was her body was disintegrated literally. So her parents had to identify her by her sneakers she wore to school that day. That's all that was left. And then I saw other stories of the teenagers being locked up in emergency rooms with depression and suicidal ideation, and there are no programs for them. And then I read about the college athletes committing suicide, and it kept on building up and building up. So, oh my gosh, Christine, you have to write a book, because I know there are ways you can help your children to help themselves, and it's never too late to start,
Mm.
right? Even if it
Yes.
happens in
Yeah.
college, it's never too late, because even with epigenetic changes in the body caused by behavioral changes or in the environment, you can reverse it, because it's not damage to the DNA. It's just changes the way the DNA works. So there's always hope, and it's always reversible. And so we have to remember that when we're feeling depressed and want to commit suicide, because this is always reversible, even though at the moment it doesn't seem that way. So I was inspired to write it because of that. I could not tolerate it because I know something that can help people. And therefore, I just had to write about it. And it just flowed out of me. Oh my goodness. And it was challenging at times, especially when I was talking about the suicides of five college athletes and what provoked, and there were no red flags. And what can we learn from it? Because that's always the point that I make. To become resilient, you need to learn from these lived
Mm.
experiences.